Test. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you, everybody, so much for coming. I am lucky enough to get the honor to introduce our speaker here tonight and to welcome everybody to the conference here. First off, I'm Alex Marcus. I am co-founder and co-CEO at a business called Mento. But I really want to give a special thanks, first and foremost, to the Millennium Alliance team. I think most of them are back right. A lot of us here were supposed to come to this conference in Miami. And of course, Hurricane Milton happened and they scrambled like crazy to get this here pulled off, and they totally did it. So maybe just quickly, a quick round of applause for their team. It's fitting that we were asked to introduce Sandy because Mento is a leadership development company. We are an operator-led coaching platform that focuses on connecting executives and leaders with world-class operators for one-on-one coaching. So we are unique from traditional coaching platforms in that our coaches are themselves practiced marketers, sales professionals, engineers, data scientists, operators, you name it. We cover over 30 different functions of professionals and provide companies with specialized coaching. So in the spirit of health and wellness and coaching, tomorrow morning, actually, we are gonna host a little walk around for those who are interested in getting some blood pumping before we all dip into conference mode. So we have a group meeting in the lobby at 7 a.m. for anybody who's an early bird before the speakers get started. No pressure at all, but for those who are morning people, and we'd love to meet you. So anyways, with that, the Millennium Alliance team did ask me, for those delegates here, it makes a big difference to them if you fill out your surveys that they've given you all. And it helps them create this incredible experience that they have here for us. So if you get a second, please make sure to fill out your surveys. And now I am extra excited to introduce to you my new friend, Sandy Locke. She is the Chief People Officer at Reinsurance Aon and is going to be talking to us today about leadership development. So with that, I am very pleased to welcome, and please join me in welcoming Sandy.
Thank you. Oh, that's... Okay, how's everybody doing? This is really a challenge, but I know everybody's had wine, so I agreed to take it. So I'm hoping that we have a good time. I have 45 minutes, but I have a lot to talk about, but we can leave some time for question and answers and just thinking about this. But when the team asked me to take this challenge on, I thought, you know, I love these events because it's an opportunity to be with our peers, to learn from each other, but to learn from the vendors of what's out there. And I think about so much of what we do day in and day out in leading the people function and what we have to endure, what we have to do to inspire. You know, I think this is a great profession, and I think it's transforming the way we work. And so I just want to give you a little bit about who I am. My journey to HR was not traditional. I started my career in banking. I was in operations management, and I ended up doing that because I had come up with this degree called information processing, and I am old enough that there wasn't computers when I was going to college. We had to go to the mainframe. We had to go to a place and do that. So I had the opportunity to be in this building JJ that was called Computers in Society, and there were 20 of us who lived together, and we all had different majors. We all had sort of different interests. And the professor would come every Wednesday, and we would talk about, well, what would computers do to society? And it was kind of interesting because I thought this was going to be really, an opportunity to get to know different people. And again, my passion for people and understanding them was there at that time. But the things we would talk about, I've seen come to fruition over my career. But would we become paperless? And I, still struggle a little bit. I was laughing with Paige. I'm like, okay, we have to fill out these forms on paper, which I'm now complaining about because I want to do it on the app. Who would think that that would happen? Would we shop online? I said I would never shop online. I'd have to feel it. Here I am shopping online. Would we work more or less? And unfortunately, I tend to work more. But hopefully, as we think about the transformation of the workforce and now thinking about well-being and what the next generation is willing to accept, we're at this point. But when I think about what I did, I came into banking during merger mania. So I was responsible for looking at, first I started in operations and looked at ATM machines and would never put any money in them. But then there were things that happened that I ended up going to the trust department, and that's when I worked on mergers. And what was interesting at that time was after 3 mergers, I just said, I don't like making humans a number, right? I just didn't love doing that. And I couldn't think about my career that way. And what we were doing at that time was justifying who would stay and who would go. And we know what happens, right? If someone doesn't have revenue or clients attached to their name, then out they go. And so I've looked at what's come full circle in my career. We eliminate people managers, and then we expect our managers to just be able to be great managers, right? But then whatever the economy is, we don't invest in learning and development. We don't invest in the things, and then we go, why aren't they good managers? I don't understand, right? It's HR's fault. Why don't they do that? But when you think about the leadership transformation and where we are, I look at that and say, the employee and employer contract has been broken. And you look at why we have quiet quitting, why we have the Great Resignation, why we're facing what we're facing. I've seen it come full circle. And so I think about a Mercer event. Yay, my Mercer friend over here. I went to in 2019 in London. And it was interesting because it was very much about well-being pre-pandemic. And it was so nice because from my career in banking, I went to nonprofit. I decided to do other coaching and was part of a coaching team, and that's when I became certified in HR, and I did small change management for medical, dental, and small businesses before I came to corporate HR. But what was so interesting was in that journey, when I was at MMC, I couldn't believe that I would be fortunate enough to see us focus on well-being. Because when I was doing coaching with small and medium-sized businesses, it was all around vision and where people, wanted their business to go. And we do that at a large scale. And I know there's so many of you that are dealing, we have different levels here of HR work, right? We have some in healthcare, some in business, some, in different industries. So for me, HR has been a real good way of learning about how the world's working in different ways. So for me, I guess what happened when I became a business partner, because I came from corporate in the beginning of my career, then did small, medium-sized businesses, then came to corporate HR. But it was through the business partner job that I thought was going to be really interesting. The way it was described to me was that HR was really taken care of by my centers of excellence, right? And I respect all of my centers of excellence, but let's face it, we don't invest enough in our centers of excellence to be excellent. And so guess what happens to all of our HR business partners? You get to do everything. So tonight, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the challenge of leadership and what we're going to be able to do together. So I wanted to challenge us just to think a little bit, to have a little bit of fun of what was called the 10 greatest business leaders of all time. So I was thinking about you putting paper on everyone's table so you could all shout them out. But the first one, I don't know if anybody can pick him out. Henry Ford. He was the man who was instrumental in developing the Model T, the first to introduce engines, a more effective method of working around his Model T production line, which resulted in the reduction in the cost of materials in the end product and the accessibility of automobiles in the United States. The second one, I think we know who he is. Steve Jobs. They like to say did not develop the wheel per se, but he did reinvent the computer and made it more approachable for all of us. I think when we look to number 3, C.J. Walker, I don't know if my notes are going to go down. Are they able to go down? Thanks. So C.J. Walker was able to create a segment in the market in the latter half of the 19th century where she produced hair care items for African-American women, and in that group she became really one of the most successful businesswomen in American economic history. And we don't hear about her, so I thought this was a really great one to pull up. So then we have J.D. Rockefeller, the first American billionaire. We have lots of billionaires now. One must have significant business expertise to be that, but he corralled and directed the oil economy of America in the 19th century. The laws of the United States, as well as public opinion on monopolies, were influenced by Standard Oil and what he did. If we can go up, number 5 was P.T. Barnum. So there was no magic or luck involved in P.T. Barnum's success. He founded Barnum and Bailey Circus and grabbed the curiosity of American audiences. So his unrivaled skill in using sensational language to promote his company became known as Shakespeare of advertising. Number 6, down here on this side, is Estee Lauder. Estee Lauder's name is recognized throughout U.S., as we know, with all the makeup. But it's interesting because came to that because she was interested in the chemistry supplies from her uncle. And she was responsible for developing her products, her brand, and a permanent place in the American beauty industry. And then number 7 is Andrew Carnegie. And I worked for Mellon Bank in a point in time. But those, unable for self-motivation, have no choice but to accept a life of mediocrity. So he did so much to revolutionize the force that brought the Industrial Revolution to the United States. So through the employment of middle managers and several other professions, this renowned steel baron's efforts contributed to the growth of the middle class in this country. And then King Croesus is an Asian ruler who ruled in the 6th century BC, and he's credited with creating the first coin currency. And that's not Bitcoin, but it is the first coin currency. And therefore, they have him on this list because he makes sense. Number 9, I think we probably can recognize him for those in my age group. Walt Disney established, obviously, the internationally adored brand and has won the hearts of millions of people worldwide. His efforts demonstrate that having heart and imagination is valuable in business. So not only did he use his storytelling to entertain, but he used it to earn people's faith in business. And the last one who made the top 10 list was Sakichi Toyoda, but he first made $150,000 with his patent for a loom, but then he used that money to assist his son in building the Toyota brand that we know today. So when you think about the most, that top 10 list, and then you look at what showed up as the top 10 most inspiring business leaders of 24, they all kind of look the same. They all make billions of dollars. So Jeff Bezos, 200 billion. Elon Musk, 198 billion. Bernard Arnault, LVMH, worth 197 billion. Mark Zuckerberg, Meta, 179. Bill Gates, Microsoft, 150 billion. Steve Ballmer, Microsoft, 126 billion. Warren Buffett, 136 billion. Larry Ellison, Oracle, 157. Larry Page, Google, 125. And Sergey, Google, 120 billion. So it's interesting to me that this is the most inspiring, right? But it's all about billions, right? It's all about, the leaders. But certainly they're credited with doing amazing things. But I thought this was interesting because I think, we have to think about what is leadership, right? What does that look like for us and how do we think about this? So the key message in terms of us leading with courage, I think it's something we don't talk enough about, right? We are expecting our leaders to just grow up and lead. And I think sometimes we, as HR professionals, are challenging that, right? We have to talk to our leaders oftentimes about what is it that they are expected to do. We have to call out, I don't think anybody's following you. Let's think about this, right? What does it mean? So the courage we need as HR professionals, to maintain our seat at the C-suite. I think about what I'm hearing today and what you're hearing every day and what you get, which is, what is happening in the world today. And oftentimes, I'm sure you have this in your feeds too, I get return to office mandates, return to office mandates. And these CEOs are saying, oh, yeah, it's turning. Everybody back, everybody back. And as we sit here today, I was so happy to see so much data that was supporting flexibility, right? That is there telling us, what is the story that we need to be able to tell. But for us to be able to influence and to be able to make the decisions that we know the workforce needs to attract, maintain, develop our talent, we definitely have to be able to use data to tell that story. So for us, and some of what I'm going to share is really just thinking through some of the data and what we can do to make sure you have the courage to lead today, but also to build your team, your people, to be the HR leaders of the future. If you think about it, and Michael and I were just talking about, the C-suite and having a seat at the table. Well, that doesn't mean that just because a woman, part of my rise probably too is I was a business person who then came into HR, and I'm also a female. So I have a lot of my male, counterparts who I know, it does feel like all of a sudden it's just the woman's the one that's at the C-suite, right? So we just have to think about how do we make sure we're making HR as a function a true partner to your CFO and your CEO. So, 5 big trends, 2024 and beyond. So I work at Aon, and I work with the reinsurance arm, and when I first was interviewing for that, I was like, well, of course insurance companies buy insurance. I just didn't know there was a whole industry about it. And I didn't realize either how incestuous it was, because it's such a well-kept secret that they make a lot of money and they only tell their own friends and family about it. So it's pretty, you know, not a traditional place for diversity. But Aon has our human capital services, and some of this comes up to some of the data I'm going to be using is just around, you know, that, what we've found. So the 5 big HR global trends, which we've been talking about a lot, and I thank Millennium and all of the speakers. I mean, I think everybody has been really inspiring in terms of what we're up against. But maintaining affordability while maximizing impact. I mean, when we think about how much it costs for our talent, the talent war that we have, the importance of HR data and analytics, which we're seeing in terms of the trend and how do we make that work, ensuring fair and transparent pay in the US. We know this is really a real issue for all of us. Different states have different laws that we have to actually attend to, but really internal compression is becoming a huge issue for all of us as we bring people in. How do we think about, you know, making sure we're ready for that? Investing in sustainable well-being, and this is a huge theme, and I have some more data to support what I've also heard from everyone else today. And then proactively managing the adoption of AI. So one of the realities that we face is the aging workforce, hence I'm here. So the 2025, which when I was doing my research for part of this talk that I was giving earlier, I was laughing that, oh, 2025, and then I went, wait, that's next year. Like, oh, by 2025, 75% of the global workforce will be born after 1983. So for me, in reinsurance and insurance, only 25% of our workforce is under 35. So that is a big problem for me personally, but what your workforce demographics are telling you and what you see when you think about the aging workforce. If you look at this slide, in 1994, only 11.9% was greater than 55, and now we're at 24.8. So how do we think about, you know, the issues that we have managing really 5 generations, which many of us are really aware of? That's not so easy. So the entire workforce is in a transitional phase, hence our great topic over these 2 days, right? So the challenges we need to address, they are real. The first is the skills tsunami. And we had one talk today where, you know, again, where are you on your journey of bringing your organization to thinking about skills? It's a mindset shift. And how do we think about that for our workers to say, well, what are my skills? How are we tracking them? How are we getting people to see why it's important for them to identify those skills? If we think about new technical capabilities and moving people into, you know, what is happening in the world, right? How are we preparing that workforce? The silver tsunami, which again is, you know, the loss of experience and what will happen over the next few years, the succession challenges. Access to talent, where do we find talent? And thinking about ways in which we can get people. So for me, to look to the insurance industry, we have a great apprentice program at Aon. But, you know, it needs to be something that is thought about even differently than when they started it. It needs to be thinking about it more long-term and going to maybe high schools, right? We have to think about things that are traditionally, we would just think about it at a different point in time. So thinking differently about access to talent. And there were some great, you know, when we talked about that with, there were a couple of really good things in my breakout sessions today where I can see people are thinking differently about it. Next gen expectations. Again, we know with the aging workforce, what are people expecting? Access to technology, agile and flexible working, automated workflows, quicker Career progression, I love that one. We have people ready to go right away. They're ready to be at the top. Different expectations, right? Attracting and retaining is the other challenge. Fourth largest risk to organizations globally when you ask CEOs. Well-being, which we've talked a lot about, which is so, key to attracting and retaining our talent. Strive for work-life balance, access to new talent pools, and launching talent. Are we the market trainer? There was one TED Talk that I loved, which I thought was super interesting, which was industry's role in teaching a generation about resilience, right? That parents just didn't do a good job of teaching the kids about resiliency, and how industry is now having to do that. So it was a very interesting talk, but we know that's happening for us oftentimes in terms of creating real expectations. And then obviously the regulation of macro HR trends with the talent war, what industries are more competitive and appealing to the next generation, how are we attracting them? They want purpose, they want to know why they're coming to work every day. And the pay transparency piece that we're talking about, I have a little bit more on that. And then people living longer. So careers and retirements are lasting longer, and people want to try something new. They just want to do something different too. So we have an opportunity to think differently about how we can pull people in to help solve our workforce issues. So the key trends and data from our workforce insights: healthcare costs are rising at the highest rate in the decade. We heard that this afternoon. AI is expected to impact nearly 40% of the jobs worldwide. Now again, it's not going to replace humans as we talked about, but it's going to change how we work. 93% of companies acknowledge shifting workforce the employee expectations. 95% believe employers are responsible for employee well-being. Think about that. I mean, that's a huge number, right? That's not, when you think about, I know the question that came up about how do I get my, CEO to understand this? I mean, this is a huge number of what people expect for a company they want to work for. And then when we think about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging strategies, and especially here in the US, as it continues to evolve with headlines against it, and then, how do we think about what we need to be doing? One of the things that I've worked on, not at Aon, at the company right before, was a strategic plan for inclusion. So I talked about what's the benefit of inclusion and getting to the business principle of it versus having it being about D, E, or I. But really, in the end, what we want is an inclusive culture that makes sure everyone is seen, valued, and heard, and that it has diversity in thought, because we know that's going to make it much better. So I wanted to just share something to lighten it up a little bit.
I would say it's good to see you, but you are in this office way too often. These are the list of HR violations that you committed in just the past few days. Starting with the very serious violation, you offered to invite Pete to the quarterly meeting, and when asked why, he said, and I quote, "For diversity and inclusional reasons, I think there are enough reasons."
So, sorry, I get different noodles ones from people all the time. It just makes me laugh every time I see it. So if you need a laugh for your team, it's a good one. I don't know if you've seen that one, but. So again, what we need to be thinking differently to enable growth. In the end, we all want to be on a winning team. We want our companies to grow. So managing talent, colleagues owning their own future. How do we help them think about that? When I keep seeing about career pathing, and I think it's a great thing, but I struggle with it because we knew growing up in my time that, well, this made sense. Well, now it's really, the rock climbing situation. And if you think about it, we really have an opportunity with skills to now help people. I mean, I look back on my career and I had something different every decade and I loved it. But most people, didn't have that. They were able sometimes to grow in the same company. Sometimes they just stayed at a company because it made sense. And I think for us, managing the talent, getting the colleagues to own their future, finding new talent, and changing how we make decisions. And so in my coaching time, that was one of the biggest things that I look at right away. How are decisions made, right? Because we know oftentimes, there's a pattern to how decisions get made. Is somebody a toll booth taker? Is it command and control? Is there too much governance? Where are we in the decision-making spectrum, and how do we influence how that gets done? And then again, the mindset shift and alignment to create the winning culture. So we attract that, we get a future fit workforce, and we leverage our data to be able to influence those conversations about attracting and, retaining our talent. So influencing the perception of HR, I think, when I think about this slide and how everybody thinks about HR, whenever I say I'm in HR, oh God, oh God, oh God, like there's people, I don't know whether it was worse when I was consulting for dentists who had the highest suicide rate because nobody wanted to go to the dentist. And then I'm in HR now, and they're like, well, I'm in HR for you, so that's not that great. So we're together as hated as anybody thinks. I think we've made a transition here, in terms of why does HR so often bear the brunt of blame for management problems? I think we've elevated ourselves, but there's more for us to do. We've trained, HR becomes the scapegoat. And one of the things that I looked at that I thought was really interesting, that we've trained managers to give feedback, but we really haven't trained them to handle the negative response to feedback, right? The culture around, okay, well, I did what you told me to do, but now what, right? And that becomes our work. And I say, when people talk to me about HR, I go, well, I love my work because it's not the same any day, right? Humans are human every day, and we get surprised every day. And sometimes they're great surprises, and we're really excited by what people do. But sometimes we could write a book, and if we all sat here, we would have a great bestseller, and we would have some really good stories that I think we could enjoy. But, when morale plummets or a star player quits, why is it that it ends up being on HR's shoulders, right? And so some of this is how do we think about, developing yourselves as strong leaders and developing your team to be leaders, to help leaders be better, to help our managers be better. So one of the things that I think about in the future of work and the future of HR, Deloitte came up with, what does a boundaryless, and I hadn't heard that term before, so a boundaryless HR function. When you think about what we do traditionally was internal employees, right? And so even when I think about contractors and we're not supposed to be talking to contractors, split them off, and that's not our responsibility. But what's happening now is HR teams are tasked with managing the data and the analytics, managing internal talent by fostering development and creating those human capital strategies around that. But we're also starting to be brought into solving with contractors, with gig workers. I heard it in a number of our sessions today. And so that's changing too, how we are brought into the conversations. We're responsible for fostering a community, creating an inclusive winning culture, and then aligning the people's strategies with the broader societal goals. So if you think about that, our role is expanding, and we had an interesting conversation around AI and our responsibility in that. When you think about how we have to partner with IT, with legal, compliance, where do we fall into that influencing spectrum? And how do we make sure we're thinking with empathy about the future of work? So the people function of the future, it is interesting when you think about strategic workforce planning. And it's, I'm sorry, this slide is a little bit, I couldn't get this darker. But strategic workforce planning with a data-driven approach to understand what your workforce looks like. It's dynamic and linked to the business strategy. It's enabling policies and procedures to come to life, and it's utilizing the latest tech. But all of these things are linked to the HR ecosystem when we think about how do we plan the workforce. Reward and recognition, a healthy work environment, leading and thinking differently, progressive work culture and engagement, flexibility, data-driven, and future-looking skills-based organizations. This is our work of the future. And it's really interesting, but it is a lot, right? And it's a lot to think about. And there are some great solutions here, which I know we're talking to everyone about, but how do we then take that back and make that a priority for our businesses to say yes to that, right? We only have so much to invest, but these are really important to link maintaining your talent to, you know, investing in some of what we're looking at today. So 44% of workers' core skills will be disrupted. So organizations need to prioritize upskilling and reskilling to bridge those gaps. So the future workforce readiness by industry, I thought this was going to be interesting to share with everyone, because for us in insurance, we're down here in the low future readiness, and we haven't invested enough. And so we've just, if you read our stock reports, we put $1 billion into actually creating an investment in our upskilling and our investment for the future readiness. But if you look at high investments, we've got technology and media, pharma and life sciences, insurtech, healthcare and public services that have actually been investing in a certain way. But down here, we've got automotive, consumer goods, industrial manufacturing, chemicals and energy down here. So looking at how we have to invest. So again, how do you make those decisions on talent and technology and what's ahead? So I did ask ChatGPT, and we did talk about this in one session, where you get what you pay for, right? But these were the answers that came. So what are the transforming processes that are enhancing an employee experience? And this is what ChatGPT said. Automated screening, chatbots, predictive analytics for talent acquisition, learning and development, personalized learning paths and skill gap analysis, performance management, real-time feedback, employee engagement, sentiment analysis, DE&I, bias detection, efficiency automations. So the question is, are you winning? I mean, every day you're all up there fighting and looking at these different generations, which we're all aware of, right? I guess, you know, how do we think about creating a workforce that embraces all of these generations and make sure we're segmenting our strategies? So again, this is just challenges and opportunities of generational talent, and I'm sure they can, you know, help give you these slides. But this one is, again, the idea of putting pay in perspective with pay transparency laws. So pay is just one factor, and again, this was talked about, you know, earlier today with O.C. Tanner. I think it was a great overview of what it is that it's about, right? So it's not just about the pay, but we do have to think about how do we put pay transparency into practice in your work. So what motivates your employees? This one was, the staff needs to stop acting like they don't want to be here. And the staff said, we're not acting. So Now, this is an oldie, but a goodie, but it still is relevant.
Come in at least 15 minutes late. I use the side door. My longer can't see me. And after that, I just sort of space out for about an hour. Space out? Yeah. I just stare at my desk. But it looks like I'm working. I do that for probably another hour after lunch, too. I'd say in a good week, I probably only do about 15 minutes of real, actual work. Peter, would you be a good sport and indulge us and just tell us a little more? Oh, yeah. Let me tell you something about TBS reports. The thing is, Bob, it's not that I'm lazy. It's that I just don't care. Don't care? It's a problem of motivation, all right? Now, if I work my ass off and Intech ships a few extra units, I don't see another dime. So where's the motivation? And here's something else, Bob. I have 8 different bosses right now. A big one? 8 bosses. 8, Bob. So that means that when I make a mistake, I have 8 different people coming by to tell me about it. That's my only real motivation, is not to be hassled, not to fear of losing my job, but you know, Bob, that only makes someone work just hard enough not to get fired.
So that again goes to what are we creating in our workforce, right? Why a winning culture is so important, and investing in the talent strategy to make sure we succeed and create that environment that people want to be a part of, that they feel they know that they're being rewarded for the work that they do. They feel they're part of something that is worthwhile for the company and for themselves. So I don't have a lot of time, so I'm just going to kind of share something that we did in terms of looking at how we're creating the environment and then leading to successful growth. And the one thing I really talk to my people about is that we're all responsible for the culture, so it's not just leadership, it's everyone. So I always say that to the people when they say, well, our culture is this. Well, you're part of that culture. So are we giving them the opportunity to speak up and be part of it? And so something that I've been working on with my human capital team is making Aon Reinsurance, which is in the middle of a very big talent war, an employer of choice. And so we looked at the cultural traits with the highest importance for the future, and that was being decisive, inclusive, collaborative, risk-taking, growth-focused, and proactive. And then we worked on focus groups with our teams to kind of look at how the behaviors, decisions, and beliefs are working, and working toward what we need to do to get our current traits aligned to the future traits, and then where's our gap? And then we're going into our skills inventory from that, because what are the behaviors that we're looking for, and then what are the skills that we need? So this is just something in terms of how colleagues can own their own future. And so basically at this point, I just hope I gave you enough to think about your own leadership legacy. I think the work that we do is so important. It means so much to so many people, and what you do matters. So someday you will look back on the progress you made and be so glad that you didn't give up. So keep going. So I'd love to get to my wine, but if anyone has questions. Oh, okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
So this is something I've been thinking about for a while. You mentioned the challenge with the supervisors, that we don't tell them how to deal with the hard conversations. But also as we think about the importance of mental health, what I'm struggling with is helping them fill the gap of having those conversations. We're like, the company cares, but that manager doesn't know how to care. They never had to have that conversation. So how have you all approached that, and what tools have you used?
So I think part of what you're talking about in terms of, I think there's some difficult conversations to have, right? And one of the things that I personally coach people on are 4 things that I think helps when we're doing this, right? One is you give the feedback, but you give it from a perspective of this is my concern. As a manager, this is my concern. That's the first step. Why is it a concern is the second step. The third is, can we think about this as a possible solution, and you get a conversation going? And the thing that I really feel is the most important thing at the end is, do you have an agreement, which is step number 4, to do it differently, and then check back in. And that feedback loop of, did we agree to do it differently? And I feel like the managers say, but I talked to them about it. I go, but did they agree to do it differently? You know, and then I have the employee saying, I didn't hear that, right? So when someone's getting feedback, there's some of them are totally just not aware. I had one of the CEOs that I worked with who was asked the question, you know, if you could give your employees a superpower, what would it be? And he said self-awareness, right? And people just don't know how to be self-aware. So I think for me, agreements and helping them make sure they agree to do it differently is a help, but it is about culture of feedback too. Is my wine coming? I know you guys have been super all day long, and I know it's a long day, so I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandy. That really was amazing. So before our dinner concludes, I did want to mention that the night is still young, and we're going to be continuing the evening with some cocktails at the lobby bar right next to the Christmas tree. We hope to see you